The date was November 20th, 1943, at 6:23 in the morning. Red Beach 2 on Betio Island in Tarawa. The sand suddenly exploded in a rhythm that the Japanese defenders had never seen before. Perfectly spaced fountains of earth and debris marching methodically forward, each eruption arriving with exact timing. Through the firing slit of their palm log bunker, Japanese naval infantry watched as a Marine First Lieutenant named William Dean Hawkins moved forward on his belly, carrying what appeared to be an oversized rifle in his hands. According to the Japanese defensive manual, American troops depended on heavy rifle volleys, and their individual weapons were supposed to be weaker than the spiritual force of a Japanese bayonet charge. But this single Marine officer and his unusual gun were about to show why 4,500 Japanese soldiers would die on Tarawa in the next 76 hours. The weapon was the Browning automatic rifle, the WWII. It weighed 19 pounds when empty and could fire 30 .6 Springfield ammunition at 2 different speeds. Slow fire produced 300 to 450 rounds per minute. Fast fire produced 500 to 650. A 20-round magazine could be completely emptied in just 3 seconds on the fast setting. In those 3 seconds alone, the entire way the Imperial Japanese Army thought about warfare would reveal itself to be dangerously outdated. This same clash would happen across 1,000 Pacific islands before the war ended. Here was a collision between a military culture that worshipped spiritual strength and close-range fighting against an industrial nation that had mechanized the business of warfare itself. The BR wasn't merely a rifle. It was American factory thinking applied to how soldiers fight, and Japanese troops who had been taught to die rather than step backward would learn that bravery meant nothing when facing machines firing with factory precision. 20 minutes after Hawkins started his push forward, his scout sniper platoon had neutralized 3 Japanese strongpoints using concentrated BR fire. The fight for Tarawa began with a display of automatic power that contradicted every lesson Japanese soldiers had learned about combat. Japan entered the Pacific War with military tactics that were frozen in place from their victories over China and Russia. The Infantry Handbook from 1909 was still being used in 1943, and it contained 17 pages discussing spiritual force and bayonet techniques, yet only 2 short paragraphs about machine guns and automatic weapons. The Japanese approach to warfare emphasized seishin, a spiritual power that could overcome any material disadvantage. The Bushido Code taught soldiers that willpower alone, if strong enough, could vanquish any enemy. This wasn't simply wartime motivation, it was formal military science. Officers at the Army Infantry School in Chiba taught students that 1 Japanese soldier could fight like 3 Chinese soldiers or 2 Russian soldiers, purely because of spiritual superiority. The Japanese were aware automatic weapons existed. They manufactured their own light machine guns, the Type 96 and the Type 99. During the war, they produced roughly 41,000 Type 96 machine guns and 53,000 Type 99 models combined. However, these weapons were given out at rates of just 2 or 3 per company and treated like specialized support equipment that required trained crews. The notion of equipping every squad with multiple automatic rifles, of making firepower instead of courage the foundation of infantry combat, was completely foreign to Japanese military thinking. This blindness would turn out to be catastrophic. From one island to the next, Japanese soldiers encountered American rifle squads that had more automatic firepower than their entire platoons. The BAR became the clearest sign of this huge difference. The Browning automatic rifle symbolized something the Japanese command structure could not understand, putting firepower into the hands of ordinary soldiers. John Browning created the design in 1917, improved it throughout the 1920s and 1930s, and then America manufactured it in volumes that left Japanese planners stunned. The BR handed standard American infantrymen the power that had previously belonged only to heavy machine gun teams. By November 1943, American factories were pumping out BARs at speeds the Japanese would have thought impossible. The New England Small Arms Corporation made roughly 168,380 BRs for the war effort. IBM, the company Japan knew only as an office equipment maker, produced 20,000 bars after converting their manufacturing lines. Other factories like Marlin and Rockwell Corporation added to the total, reaching approximately 350,000 BARs produced during the war. These figures were utterly unimaginable to a Japanese military that hand-fitted each Type 96 machine gun in workshops where skilled workers spent weeks perfecting individual weapons. Marine Sergeant John Basilone, who would receive the Medal of Honor for his actions on Guadalcanal, fired both machine guns and BARs throughout his service. During October 1942 on Guadalcanal, he stopped roughly 3,000 Japanese attackers using machine gun fire alone, demonstrating just how devastating American automatic weapons were against Japanese wave attacks. The weapon's basic numbers told only half the story. Certainly, it fired the heavy .30-06 round at rates reaching 650 rounds per minute. Certainly, its accurate range stretched beyond 1,000 yards. Yet what made it truly revolutionary was how Americans actually used it. By 1943, every Marine rifle squad carried 3 BARs. Every Army squad had at minimum 1. This meant American small units had automatic firepower built in, ready to use right away, without waiting for machine gun crews to get their equipment in position. August 7, 1942 marked the start, Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. This was the Pacific War's first major American push forward, and it gave the Japanese their first real warning about what they would face. The fighting at the Tenaru, which Americans sometimes called the Ilu River, erupted on August 21, 1942, and it showed what would become the standard pattern for island warfare across the Pacific. Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki led exactly 917 men in a nighttime assault on Marine positions. They planned to smash through the Americans and crush them in close combat, where they believed Japanese superiority of spirit would dominate. Instead, they charged straight into overlapping automatic weapons fire, with BARs positioned throughout the Marine defensive line. Private First Class Albert Schmid was running a machine gun that night and became well known for his actions. However, the real reason the Marines won was because all the automatic weapons, especially the 12 BRRs spread through the rifle companies, worked together to stop the assault. Each bar gunner had been trained to release short 6-round bursts, about 1 second of shooting, then move to a new spot. When Japanese soldiers sprinted toward the gun flashes, they found empty positions waiting. Out of Ichiki's starting force of 917 men, only 128 made it back alive. The mathematics was brutal and clear. A Japanese rifle squad of 13 men could theoretically get off 65 careful shots per minute using their bolt-action Arisaka rifles. A Marine squad with 3 BARs could send out 150 rounds in the first 4 seconds of fighting, before the Japanese soldiers could chamber and fire their next round. Japan's answer to American firepower was to dig deeper and further underground. By late 1943, vast networks of tunnels and caves had become the heart of Japanese island defenses. These weren't just small dugouts. They were underground fortresses with multiple rooms, linked passages, and zones of fire that overlapped each other. Japanese military leaders believed these places were impossible to take without massive amounts of artillery or soldiers charging directly inside. The BAR completely changed this. November 22, 1943. Tarawa again. When Marines encountered the first of these complex underground Japanese defensive systems, they developed a technique that soon became the standard way Marines fought them. Approach from the side, get the BR gunner about 25 yards from the opening, and empty 1 full magazine into the entrance using a back-and-forth figure-8 firing pattern, keeping fire continuous. The science was straightforward, though the results were horrifying. The .30-06 rounds from the bar stayed deadly as they bounced off walls, ceilings, and floors inside those enclosed spaces. Just 1 magazine fired into a cave mouth could fill an entire underground chamber with ricocheting projectiles. Marines discovered that firing a 20-round magazine into a cave created what they called a hornet's nest. Bullets would bounce chaotically off every surface in unpredictable paths, and no one inside could survive it. Japanese troops who had drilled to hold these caverns until they died discovered that death arrived before they could even spot their attacker. June 15, 1944, the island of Saipan in the Mariana Islands chain. The Japanese had invested months constructing defenses, taking lessons from previous battles at Tarawa and other atolls. Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Sato commanded around 31,000 defenders, positioned in what military planners considered unbreakable positions. They had analyzed American tactics and prepared for everything, or so they thought. Everything except the absolute volume of automatic fire Americans would bring with them. By the time of the Saipan campaign, Marine officers had reorganized their rifle companies to place BAR teams at the very center. Each company's structure now revolved around bar teams. The official rules said 1 bar for every Marine squad. But in practice, Marines grabbed extra bars any time they could find them. Certain squads were fighting with 5 or 6 BRs, turning regular foot soldiers into moving platforms of automatic firepower. When Marines fought across Purple Heart Ridge on Saipan, they proved the BAR's worth over and over. The Japanese had arranged their positions in connected caves carved from coral limestone, each one supposedly impossible to get around. Private First Class Harold Agerholm, though not primarily a BAR operator, received the Medal of Honor after his death for pulling 45 wounded Marines to safety during heavy fire. His actions showed the kind of courage that let BAR teams keep their firing positions and maintain the powerful firepower that broke the Japanese defense. What happened at Saipan was staggering in scale. Only the 2nd Marine Division fired 8.7 million rounds of 30-06 ammunition in 3 weeks, with much of it coming from BARs and heavier machine guns. The Japanese were expecting to exchange casualties at numbers that favored them, using spiritual power and strong defensive positions. Instead, they bumped into a simple fact of mathematics. America could make more bullets than Japan could produce soldiers to fire them. The BAR's power went beyond just the number of people who fell. It destroyed the Japanese military mind's confidence in itself. The sound itself became part of the weapon. The BAR's sound, that distinctive rapid hammering, different from bigger machine guns, meant that mobile automatic firepower was close by and searching. People who survived described what it felt like to hear several BARs open up at once, a rolling sound like distant thunder announcing that overwhelming firepower was present. The BAR's mental impact grew stronger because Marines used their weapons with discipline. Training taught Marines to fire short, controlled bursts that kept accuracy high and wasted less ammunition. Japanese soldiers expected sloppy, wasteful American gun handling. Instead, they faced precise, measured fire. Every burst meant real casualties, not simply keeping heads down. By the middle of 1944, Japanese commanders who found captured documents were shocked to see that their own soldiers were being told to spot and kill BAR operators first. Knowing these guns were the center of American small unit strength, yet spotting BAR gunners in the confusion of real combat turned out to be nearly impossible. The weapons were always moving around, and every Marine squad had multiple automatic rifles attached. February 19, 1945, brought the assault on Iwo Jima. The Japanese had now lived with American firepower for 3 full years. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi commanded around 21,000 soldiers and had reviewed every previous island battle, studying every tactic the Americans used and thinking of counters for each one. His plan was defense in multiple layers, with tunnels running for 11 miles underground, which was the furthest development yet of Japanese cave fighting techniques. Yet American soldiers using the BAR had advanced their methods too. Marines now deployed specialized bar tactics that they had learned through bitter experience across many battles. Supporting automatic riflemen became the cornerstone of American combat doctrine. The gunner led the charge forward, laying down suppressive fire while his teammates moved to new positions. A weapon that had served primarily as a defensive tool during the First World War transformed into an aggressive, offensive instrument across the Pacific theater. Gunnery Sergeant John Baz, whose heroics at Guadalcanal had made him a legend among his peers, returned to active combat only to fall on Iwo Jima on February 19, 1945, during the invasion's opening assault. While directing his machine gun sections in a forward push, mortars caught him. He had endured some of the Pacific War's most brutal fighting, yet his story ended in those first desperate hours of battle. The human cost at Iwo Jima told its own grim story. Just 183 Japanese soldiers surrendered from an original garrison of roughly 21,000. The remainder perished where they stood, with many entombed in caves sealed shut by automatic weapons fire. In 36 days of combat, Marines expended an astounding 12 million rounds of small arms ammunition. The 28th Marine Regiment alone, fighting for Mount Suribachi, burned through approximately 90,000 rounds of automatic rifle ammunition in just 5 days. By April 1, 1945, the battle for Okinawa loomed. This final campaign would prove conclusively that American automatic firepower held absolute superiority. The Japanese 32nd Army, defending with roughly 130,000 soldiers drawn from regular forces and conscripts alike, had constructed what they believed would be an impenetrable defense. Every tactical lesson learned, every adaptation attempted had gone into this preparation. Yet they confronted not merely riflemen armed with automatic weapons, but an entire American military apparatus engineered to mass-produce and distribute firepower on an unprecedented scale. By the time Okinawa fell under attack, American factories had churned out more than 300,000 automatic rifles. Field units had ditched official supply allocations entirely, arming themselves with one automatic rifle for every 2 or 3 soldiers. The 96th Infantry Division carried substantially more weapons than authorized. Understanding that survival hinged on overwhelming firepower, soldiers across both armies had learned this brutal equation. Staying alive meant possessing more firepower, and firepower meant automatic rifles. Colonel Hiromichi Yajara, a senior Japanese staff officer who somehow survived the Okinawa battle, later documented accounts of American material abundance, though direct references to automatic weapons in his available writings remain difficult to confirm. The Shuri Line, Japan's primary defensive position, crumbled not from massive frontal assaults, but from the relentless, methodical application of automatic fire. Cave after cave, strongpoint after strongpoint, fell to sustained automatic weapons fire. Japanese soldiers had prepared for spiritual sacrifice, but discovered themselves facing industrial annihilation. The automatic rifle's story was fundamentally inseparable from American manufacturing capacity. While defenders died in mountain caves, American production plants achieved manufacturing feats that would have seemed impossible to Japanese military planners. IBM's facility in Poughkeepsie, New York, which had previously built typewriters and calculating machines, shifted to automatic rifle production in 1941. By 1944, IBM had delivered 20,000 weapons, each machined to tolerances tighter than Japanese hand-assembled rifles could achieve. New England Small Arms Corporation dominated wartime production, manufacturing 168,380 automatic rifles in a stunning demonstration of what American industrial mobilization could accomplish. Marlin Rockwell Corporation, with minimal weapons manufacturing experience before the war, constructed entirely new factories dedicated to automatic rifle production. Swedish manufacturer Carl Gustaf offered licensed production and supposedly approached Japan through neutral channels in 1943 about possible sales. Tokyo's military attaché in Stockholm explored the proposition, but Japan possessed neither the foreign currency nor the shipping capacity to make such an arrangement practical. Production numbers told an overwhelming story. Approximately 350,000 automatic rifles manufactured against Japan's output of 41,000 Type 96 and 53,000 Type 99 light machine guns. America built nearly 4 times as many automatic rifles as Japan produced of all its light machine gun models combined. Ammunition supply formed another pillar of American industrial achievement, a concept foreign to Japanese military calculations. Each automatic rifleman carried between 12 and 15 loaded magazines in combat, totaling 240 to 300 rounds. Additional ammunition distributed throughout the squad meant a Marine rifle team could transport 2,000 rounds of automatic rifle ammunition beyond standard rifle ammunition. American ammunition factories produced billions of cartridges during wartime operations. Though specific figures claiming 21 billion 30-06 rounds remain unverified, American ammunition plants delivered approximately 47 billion rounds of small arms ammunition across all calibers during the entire war. This abundance guaranteed American forces never experienced ammunition shortages, even when expending it at rates that horrified resource-constrained Japanese commanders. At Okinawa alone, the U.S. 10th Army discharged roughly 60 million rounds in 82 days. The 24th Corps independently reported expending 25 million rounds of rifle and automatic weapons fire. Japanese soldiers, often rationed to 100 rounds per man for an entire engagement, faced opponents who could expend that quantity in mere seconds. Behind these numbers existed flesh-and-blood individuals on both sides, transformed by automatic weapons into casualties of industrial warfare. Japan recorded approximately 2.3 million military deaths throughout the entire war. Research conducted by Japanese historians indicates roughly 60%, approximately 1.4 million, perished from starvation and disease rather than combat injuries. Combat deaths resulted from multiple causes: artillery, aerial bombardment, naval gunfire, and small arms fire combined. The precise number killed specifically by automatic rifles remains impossible to calculate. Yet these weapons' contribution to American firepower dominance remained undeniable. Across the Pacific, American forces achieved casualty ratios sometimes reaching 10-1 against defenders, fundamentally through superior firepower rather than numerical strength. Following mid-1944, Marines refined standard procedures for cave assault that maximized automatic weapon effectiveness. This tactical doctrine evolved through battles from Tarawa through Saipan, established systematic protocols. Position the automatic rifleman at an angle to the cave mouth. Maintain a 25-yard distance. Discharge full magazines in disciplined bursts. Deploy white phosphorus grenades to identify cleared positions and sustain fire while infantry advance. Repeated thousands of times across Pacific battlefields, this procedure transformed cave assault from desperate close-quarters combat into calculated mechanical operation. Japanese defenders, who had engineered caves as killing grounds against rushing attackers, discovered themselves trapped inside shooting galleries where automatic fire ricocheted endlessly through confined spaces. The gap between American and Japanese automatic weapons extended beyond mere quantity into fundamental quality differences. The automatic rifle embodied decades of industrial refinement, mass production knowledge, and mechanical precision that Japanese manufacturing simply could not replicate. The Type 96 and Type 99, Japanese light machine guns, the nearest Japanese equivalents, required two-person operation, weighed substantially more, the Type 96 at 19.2 pounds and Type 99 at 21.6 pounds with support legs, and suffered chronic manufacturing defects. Japanese production, rooted in traditional craft methods and small workshop techniques, could never achieve the precision tolerances necessary for dependable automatic operation. Springs fractured under stress, extractors snapped, and feed systems jammed repeatedly. Material science illustrated the fundamental contrast. American automatic rifles featured chrome molybdenum steel barrels capable of sustained fire without warping. Japanese weapons relied on inferior steel, demanding meticulous heat treatment by master craftsmen, an approach impossible to industrialize for mass production. American assembly line methods produced superior weapons at faster rates than Japanese traditional techniques produced inferior ones. The automatic rifle revolutionized combat marksmanship from individual precision into systematic firepower application. Japanese infantrymen trained extensively in accurate rifle marksmanship with deliberate aim discovered American automatic riflemen operated without traditional aiming. They traversed fire across targets, correcting based on where rounds impacted. This technique, completely impossible with bolt-action rifles, rendered Japanese concealment and camouflage, fundamental components of their infantry strategy, significantly less effective. An automatic rifleman could spray an entire slope in a single magazine, compelling hidden Japanese soldiers either to expose themselves or perish in hiding. The doctrine of area denial through firepower abundance, rather than accurate marksmanship, represented a revolutionary transformation in infantry tactics that Japanese military command never successfully countered. American logistical superiority enabled automatic rifle effectiveness. Every weapon in action depended on supply chains extending thousands of miles back to American factories, railroad networks, cargo vessels, and forward ammunition depots. Japanese military planners found this logistical architecture inconceivable. A single Marine regiment consumed roughly 40,000 pounds of small arms ammunition weekly. This required dedicated transport ships, shore landing parties, ammunition handlers, and advanced supply stations. Japanese commanders anticipated Americans would exhaust supplies after initial offensives, instead witnessing American firepower intensify as battles progressed. At Ulithi, an anchorage developed from bare islands in 1944, American supply personnel processed enormous ammunition quantities daily. Cargo ships ran continuous shuttles from American West Coast ammunition factories to Pacific forward bases. The infrastructure, harbors, ships, material handling systems, storage depots, required investment exceeding Japan's complete military budget. The automatic rifle transcended mere technological advancement. It represented a fundamentally different warfare philosophy. Japanese military tradition, rooted in samurai heritage, emphasized individual combat prowess, personal honor, and spiritual force. American military culture, grounded in industrial democracy, prioritized firepower efficiency and mechanical advantage. This ideological division even affected weapon treatment. Japanese soldiers revered their rifles as sacred instruments, manifestations of the emperor's authority, maintained with ceremonial care. American Marines viewed automatic rifles as interchangeable tools, reliable, replaceable, expendable if damaged. When automatic rifles malfunctioned, Marines obtained fresh weapons from supply stocks. When Japanese weapons broke down, soldiers frequently died attempting repairs under fire. Automatic rifle instruction mirrored industrial production principles. At Camp Pendleton and Fort Benning, Marines and soldiers mastered automatic weapon techniques through repetitive practice, standardized procedures, and factory floor training approaches. Individual Marines discharged more ammunition during training than Japanese soldiers encountered across their service. The baseline automatic rifle training program required each Marine to fire minimum 2,000 rounds through different exercises. Training covered instinctive fire techniques, traversing fire, rapid-fire sequences, coordinated fire from paired weapons, and high-speed magazine replacement. Upon completion, Marines changed magazines in under 3 seconds, cleared jams through muscle memory, and sustained accurate fire while advancing. This training expenditure, thousands of cartridges per individual, hundreds of hours per Marine, existed only because American industry could support it. Japan, perpetually starved of ammunition even for combat needs, could never fund comparable training. Japanese conscripts commonly entered battle, having discharged fewer than 100 training rounds. The Pacific War's final battles, Iwo Jima and Okinawa, definitively demonstrated American automatic weapons supremacy. Japanese forces, despite possessing terrain advantages and meticulous preparation, confronted an inescapable truth. They fielded human bodies against mechanized industrial output. Marines at Iwo Jima expended an estimated 12 million rounds across 36 days. Okinawa witnessed 60 million rounds in 82 days, with the 24th Corps alone documenting 25 million. Automatic weapons accounted for the overwhelming majority. Japanese defenders, depleted by hunger and thirst, endured their final hours under ceaseless automatic fire. Immobilized, unable to retaliate, simply awaiting death. Final engagement statistics laid bare industrial warfare's reality. Each Japanese defender faced hundreds of bullets, equivalent to what an entire rifle company would have delivered in traditional combat, supplied through industrial logistics and automatic weapons. Atomic weapons, ultimately ending the conflict, have dominated historical memory regarding Japan's defeat. Yet the conventional firepower revolution, embodied by automatic rifles, had already demonstrated Japan's inevitable collapse. The atomic bombs claimed roughly 200,000 Japanese lives, but conventional weapons, including automatic rifles, had already inflicted vastly greater casualties throughout the entire Pacific campaign. Admiral Suemu Toyota, the Navy's chief of staff, grasped something crucial during those final imperial conferences. He could see with absolute clarity that American industrial dominance alone would guarantee Japan's defeat. The atomic bombs certainly hastened the surrender, yes, but they didn't fundamentally alter the underlying reality. Japan simply could not match America's ability to manufacture weapons and ammunition at scale. After the war ended, Japanese military officers who traveled to America for study programs confronted the staggering truth about American manufacturing capacity. They reviewed official records and discovered a sobering fact. Roughly 350,000 BARs had rolled off American production lines during the conflict. That figure represented nearly 4 times everything Japan had managed to produce in light machine guns of all types combined. Manufacturing each BRR cost approximately $75 in 1944 dollars. By comparison, the Japanese Type 96 machine guns demanded far more in both materials and labor while producing inferior results on the battlefield. When Japanese industrial delegations visited American factories during the 1950s, they witnessed production methods that suddenly explained their loss. Assembly lines running smoothly, standardized components, rigorous quality control procedures, all the machinery that had enabled America to manufacture superior weapons in staggering quantities while Japan had struggled to hand-build inferior copies. Military historians have since concluded that the BAR, working alongside other automatic weapons, demonstrated just how futile Japanese resistance tactics truly were. The weapon itself proved a fundamental truth. In contemporary warfare, industrial capacity trumps fighting spirit. Production capability determines military capability, and no measure of human courage can bridge a massive firepower gap. Dr. Edward Dreyer, a prominent Pacific War historian, made this observation directly about American automatic weapons and their effect on infantry combat in that theater. The Japanese never developed effective counter-tactics, he noted, because they faced a problem that tactics couldn't solve. It was purely industrial in nature. They were fighting an enemy capable of equipping every squad member with automatic weapons, supplying unlimited ammunition, and replacing losses almost instantly. The casualty figures themselves tell this brutal story. Throughout the entire Pacific War, Japanese forces killed approximately 111,000 Americans from all causes, while Japan suffered roughly 2.3 million deaths, a ratio exceeding 20 to 1. Certainly many elements contributed to this terrible disparity, yet American automatic weapons superiority stood among the most significant. The BAR's influence extended far beyond military battlefields into Japanese society itself. The weapon that shattered Japanese militarism simultaneously demonstrated something profound about industrial democracies. Japan's post-war trajectory would prove this point. The nation embraced precisely the values that the BAR represented: industrial efficiency, technological advancement, mass production excellence. Veterans who had witnessed American industrial capacity firsthand went on to establish major companies after the conflict. Honda, Toyota, Sony, these enterprises applied lessons they had learned from observing American production superiority. They grasped that genuine national power came not from military conquest, but from industrial production strength. Japan's remarkable economic transformation found its roots partly in lessons absorbed from experiencing American industrial warfare. When Japan established its self-defense forces during the 1950s and received military assistance from America, they were equipped with American weapons, including approximately 10,000 BARs distributed through aid programs. Japanese soldiers now trained with the very weapons that had defeated their military predecessors, an ironic twist in the larger transformation from militarism toward alliance with industrial democracy. Decades later, American and Japanese veterans gathered at various specific battlefields for reconciliation ceremonies. Former enemies sat together at these meetings and spoke about their experiences with remarkable openness. Bar gunners from America's Marine Corps and Japanese infantry survivors who had endured the weapon shared their perspectives on that rifle and how it had shaped their combat lives. These reconciliation meetings revealed something significant. Both sides understood they had been caught in vast forces beyond individual control. American Marines carrying their BARs represented industrial democracy's machinery, while Japanese soldiers had served as tools of military feudalism. The collision between these two systems had unleashed tragedy on an enormous scale, though it had also brought transformation. During a 1995 ceremony on Iwo Jima, marking 50 years since that brutal battle, American and Japanese veterans stood together and placed wreaths at memorials. They acknowledged that the weapons responsible for so much death had simultaneously ended a conflict and fundamentally transformed a nation. The BAR had been an instrument of destruction, certainly, but also a tool of liberation from militarism. Looking back at the BAR's complete impact on the Pacific War reveals the true scale of industrial combat. The production numbers tell part of the story. America manufactured approximately 350,000 BARs. Japan produced roughly 41,000 Type 96 light machine guns and about 53,000 Type 99 light machine guns, giving America a 3.7 to 1 advantage in automatic weapons production alone. But combat ammunition usage demonstrated even starker contrasts. At Tarawa, American forces fired 3 million rounds across 76 hours. In Guam, 15 million rounds in 3 weeks. Iwo Jima saw 12 million rounds expended in 36 days. Okinawa consumed 60 million rounds over 82 days. These figures illuminate industrial asymmetry with devastating clarity. The death tolls reflected this imbalance. Across the entire Pacific theater, Japanese losses compared to American losses ran approximately 20 to 1. From Japan's military force of 2.3 million deaths overall, roughly 1.4 million, 60%, came from starvation and disease rather than combat itself. Approximately 900,000 Japanese military personnel died directly from combat causes. America possessed such overwhelming production capacity that it could lose 10 bars for every Japanese automatic weapon and still maintain complete superiority. American forces could expend hundreds of bullets for every single bullet Japan had available. They could equip entire squads with firepower that Japan couldn't distribute even to entire companies. The BAR forced profound transformations in military strategy that extended far beyond the Pacific conflict itself. This weapon demonstrated that portable automatic firepower distributed among squad members proved far more effective than concentrating machine guns in fixed positions. Military doctrine across the globe would reshape itself around lessons written in the blood of defeated Japanese forces. The Soviet Union, watching American success unfold, accelerated its assault rifle development. The AK-47, designed shortly after the war, was explicitly created to provide every soldier with automatic firepower. China, studying the causes of Japanese military collapse, restructured its entire military foundation around automatic weapons. When Japan itself established its self-defense forces, automatic weapons became the cornerstone of infantry tactics. The transformation had become complete. Warfare had fundamentally shifted from individual marksmanship toward industrial firepower, from warrior skill toward production capacity, from spiritual strength toward mechanical advantage. The BRR stood as the instrument that drove this lesson home across the Pacific, its lesson written in the casualties of Japanese soldiers who discovered the hard way that bravery alone could never overcome American industrial power. General Tomoyuki Yamashita commanded Japanese forces through both spectacular victories and catastrophic defeats before facing execution for war crimes in 1946. His military career encompassed the complete journey of Japanese military fortune, from triumphant victories like Singapore through devastating losses in the Philippines. Before his death, he reflected on what had truly defeated Japan, recognizing that the nation had fundamentally misunderstood modern warfare's actual nature. Other surviving Japanese commanders reached this same conclusion. They understood that the BAR and similar weapons represented something beyond simply superior firepower. These weapons embodied an entire system, industrial democracy's capacity to mass-produce warfare tools while preserving both quality and innovation. Japan had brought warrior traditions to an industrial battlefield with entirely predictable outcomes. Captain Mitsuo Fuchida, who personally led the Pearl Harbor attack and survived the war to become a Christian evangelist, later reflected on what American power truly represented. He recognized that weapons like the BAR symbolized American strength not through individual warrior superiority, but through systematic application of industrial capacity to warfare. Every single BAR emerged from American factories, American supply systems, American training institutions, representing an entire society mobilized for industrial combat. Today, throughout Japan's military museums, American World War II weapons occupy places of honor as historical artifacts. These displays frequently feature the BAR, acknowledging its historical significance in the Pacific War. Japanese visitors, particularly younger people, examine these weapons to understand how their nation's militaristic past fell to industrial democracy. The messages conveyed remain evident. Modern national power derives not from warrior spirit, but from industrial capacity, not from willingness toward sacrifice, but from productive ability, not from individual heroism, but from systematic organization. The BRR conveyed these lessons to Japanese soldiers who learned through combat, paying the ultimate price for their education in blood. Japan's transformation from militaristic empire toward peaceful economic power rested partly on understanding gained from confronting American automatic weapons. The BAR did far more than kill Japanese soldiers. It killed Japanese militarism itself, proving conclusively that industrial capacity, rather than spiritual power, determines victory in modern warfare. Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima commanded the Japanese 32nd Army during Okinawa, the Pacific War's final major engagement. On June 22, 1945, acknowledging inevitable defeat, he committed ritual suicide together with his chief of staff. His parting orders to remaining troops acknowledged how futile continued resistance had become against American material superiority. Ushijima's death symbolized the conclusion of organized Japanese resistance throughout the Pacific War. The American forces that defeated him possessed overwhelming advantages in every category: artillery, air power, naval bombardment, and most crucially, automatic weapons. The BAR represented just one element within this larger superiority, yet it embodied the entire industrial advantage that made American victory inevitable. Cave entrances across Pacific Islands, still scarred by bullet impacts, stand as testimonies to the meeting of two competing military philosophies. Within those scars lies the narrative of how America's automatic rifle transcended mere battle victories, instead demonstrating warfare's fundamental transformation from individual combat toward industrial process. The sound of BAR fire echoing across Pacific Islands meant more than victory in any single engagement. It represented the industrial age, announcing its mastery over every previous warfare model. Japanese soldiers dying in caves from ricocheting rounds they never even perceived represented witnesses to industrial democracy's terrible precision. The BAR's Pacific legacy encompassed far more than military victories. It transformed warfare itself, reshaped nations, and redefined understanding about national power during the industrial era. Every burst from a BAR represented instruction in this new reality, delivered to Japanese soldiers who paid with their lives for this education. Ultimately, the Browning automatic rifle accomplished what no diplomatic treaty or negotiation possibly could have. It taught Japan through overwhelming demonstration that military aggression directed against industrial democracy was not merely inadvisable, it was impossible. That lesson, learned in blood on Pacific Islands stretching from Guadalcanal through Okinawa, created the pacifist Japan that would eventually become America's most important Asian partner. This transformation commenced when the first Marine operating a BAR pulled his trigger, beginning to teach the cruel mathematics of modern warfare. The BAR's Pacific narrative ultimately recounts how industrial capacity defeats warrior tradition, how mass production overwhelms individual courage, and how modern warfare benefits not the bravest soldiers but the most productive factories. The lesson appears written across thousands of cave entrances throughout the Pacific, each bearing scars from BAR rounds that ricocheted through darkness, delivering death to warriors who believed spirit could triumph over steel. That belief perished alongside them, and from this death emerged a new Japan, one that comprehended how genuine national power originates not from military conquest, but from economic progress, not from warrior custom, but from industrial advancement, not from willingness toward death, but from capacity for production. The Browning automatic rifle had communicated this lesson in the only language warfare understands: overwhelming, undeniable lethal force.